Hey everybody, it's Carissa, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Aamina Ahmad today. She has like a gazillion awards, went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. She's a Stegner Fellow. She just came out with the Return of Faraz Ali, which I've loved so much that I've destroyed the cover and spilled on it. But anyway, I'm really excited to talk to you today about kind of your, I hate to, not for lack of a better word, journey is how you got here, your creative practice. And also there's so much like embedded psychology and understanding structures of society and our roles and our limitations in the book that I just kind of wanted to talk through. I think that for me, actually, can you give a brief sort of summary of the novel?
Sure, great. I would love to. Thank you, first of all, for having me, Carissa. I'm so happy to get to talk to you about the book. The book, The Return of Faraz Ali, tells the story of a man who is asked to cover up a crime. So it reads initially very much like a crime story. And he's asked to go to the old city in Lahore. It's set in the 1960s in Pakistan. And he's asked to go and do this cover up in the red light district of the city. But the person who's asking him to do this is his father. And we learn that he, as a young boy, was taken by his father from this area. This is the area that he is from and that he grew up, spent his early childhood in. But his father took him from there in order to give him a better life. And now is kind of calling in on that debt by saying, I'm in trouble and I need your help. So when Faraz Ali goes to the old city to investigate the crime and he discovers what it is, he kind of has to make decisions about whether he is going to fulfill like this obligation to his father. And also I think he's faced with the fact that it's kind of a return to his past. And is he going to go find this family? What is his father's connection to this crime? Does his family still live here? Is he still going to find them? What will it mean if he does? And what will it mean if he doesn't? And that's kind of how the story begins and really kind of grows from there.
I think for me, so can you talk a little bit about what got you excited about the story, or how you kind of, what your process is like? Because this is sort of like a major endeavor, and what your connection, like, did you spend time in Pakistan? Because you grew up in the UK, right?
You're right. I did grow up in the UK. I went to Pakistan very frequently as a kid. So I had kind of a strong relationship with Pakistan, and I had family there who I visited each year, and sometimes twice a year even. We were really lucky. We got to travel there a lot. And I felt really connected with Pakistan. It was where I learned Urdu, but also it was just so entirely different to the kind of the world of the UK in every way. Yeah, I mean, I think everything from the landscape to the way social interactions happened. I mean, there were other things that I felt in some ways more comfortable because I looked like everybody else. But in other ways, I was really struck by the things that were very different and things that were harder in Pakistan. There was a lack of public space. It was harder as a girl to go around freely. So these were things that kind of, were early impressions I had. But also like the warmth and connection with family that, we didn't have this kind of extended family in England, but I came to Pakistan and I found that. And my father's family home, that the place that they rented, was pretty close to the old city of Lahore, not in it. And I didn't go there much at all growing up, to the old city, which is basically this very ancient part of Lahore. It's walled in. Though much of the wall and the gates are no longer there, but psychologically there is a kind of gap between that part of the city and the rest of Lahore. So we didn't go there, but the way people would talk about the old city as though it was this different place, I mean, I found it really intriguing. It felt like this really kind of mysterious, shadowy, interesting place. And when later on in life I went and visited there, and the geography, it really is like a maze. Tiny crowded streets and alleyways, and the roofs are so close, the buildings kind of loom, people do jump from roof to roof, which they do in the book. You know, that's kind of one of the ways they move around that part of the city. It was really fascinating to me. And I felt like, and I'd been always a big fan of kind of noir. And I thought, I was like, Lahore, this part of Lahore is a great setting for that kind of a story. Just like kind of Chandler's LA has these mean streets. I was like, oh, Lahore does too. And so actually a lot of it was about, you know, exploring Pakistan as a place, exploring this part of the city as a place. And I think if you are sort of somebody who grows up in a diaspora, you're often trying to work out what your relationship is to your kind of country of origin and what your relationship is to that heritage. And in a way, writing the book was me trying to figure that out a little bit as well.
Do you think, so can you talk a little bit about Feroz and sort of where his personality, or who he is and why he exists or needed to exist as he does now?
Yeah, I think Faraz is an interesting character because I think for me, my relationship changed over the course of the book, writing him. I think, you know, he's in the police, and the police have a great deal of power in I mean, everywhere really, but particularly in Pakistani society. And they're very much a tool of the state and really seen as kind of a force of state oppression. And, you know, the first moment we see Faraz in the book, he's beating a protester up. And, you know, I think there is a kind of ingrained violence there, and a brutality.
Like a detachment. It's very
yeah.
Detached when sorry, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But I think that's a great word to describe it. He is really detached. It's kind of just a function of that job. I do it. I do what I'm told. And which is why, in a way, when he's confronted by a crime that's kind of really just pushes him into that place of like, actually, can I do this now on top of all the other things I've had to do? But one of the things that kind of interested me about him was that, you know, although he definitely represents that very old school shape of kind of oppressive force, part of, you know, in a society like Pakistan, which is extremely hierarchical, being part of state power, you know, being embedded within it is kind of a way to protect yourself from it. It's an act of self-preservation if you become part of the system, especially for a man like him who has his origins in the red light city, and which is considered disreputable. And he's kind of weighed down by that kind of social position that he's in. So I think I kind of grew to feel more for him over the course of writing the book, the weight of carrying those things, alongside, you know, feeling like a person like that should be held to account for the things that they do. And he has done things that I think are, you know,
I mean,
troubling.
I think that there's this moment when he's leaving for his new position where there's a protester, a young boy, casually says, "Help, I'm dying." And there's like a callousness to it, but also, again, in some ways, the book really illustrates how we're all in these prisons. They're just different, I guess you could say.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Everybody's trapped.
What?
Everybody's trapped in it.
Yeah, but more so, I mean, some people more so than others, I think. Can you talk a little bit about his sister and kind of her, I guess, for lack of a better word, she's also trapped, but in a very different situation, and kind of how she came about. I think for me, what's most interesting about her is her relationship with her daughter and her mother, and how the ways that there's this connective energy called love that really binds us, but the way that she shows love and shows up for love are really, they're different than my conceptions of love through a Western lens. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak about the role of love in the book and through Aamina.
Right. That's a really interesting question. Yeah, she's Faraz's sister Rosina is one of my favorite characters, I think, in the book. I mean, just in terms of who she is, she's a courtesan, but she's grown up. This in the world of the book, there is a kind of hereditary kind of aspect to sex work. So she has known she's always going to do this work, and she grows up to do it. And she's had an interesting trajectory as a very successful courtesan and very beautiful. She has been recruited into the film industry, and she becomes an actress for a while. So she kind of leaves the world of that red light district behind a little bit, but finds that she can't ever truly leave it. And as you say, she has a mother and a daughter who are still there. And she wants very much for her daughter to have choices or to have, options that she didn't particularly have. I mean, I think you're right that love looks different in this world. Love is kind of about, it's similar in that, this notion of love is about providing. Love is about guaranteeing security, not for yourself, but for the collective good, for the family. And that is kind of her primary concern has been, whatever I'm doing, I'm providing for my mother in her old age, which is my job, and providing for my child. But she doesn't necessarily want her own child to go into this work. And she wants her to have that choice. But because of the secrecy around the relationship with her child, often it's expressed in an almost sibling-like, sisterly frustration and irritation. And I think sometimes with Rosina, I feel like she's never had the chance to really love her child because of giving her up so early. And as a result, there's a frustration and a rage. And she herself, she tries really hard to kind of dictate, her fate in a world which really gives her very few options because of her class, because of her caste background, and because of the work that she's done. So when you say that, and her age, she's becoming older, and she can't rely on the things. She's continually relied on her looks and on the and her work is built around that. So she kind of has, I think, numerous kind of burdens that she carries. And so her love doesn't always look like a tender thing, but I believe that it's really forceful and passionate and deep.
I've never thought about love in terms of provision.
Yeah.
At its core. And I think that that's a really interesting sort of concept to think about, or for me to kind of really take in. There's a point, I think, where you talk about grief and holding grief, and the sort of like at the very beginning, the sort of extreme grief, this earth-shattering grief, and then that being seen as a power, but actually it's. Can you talk a little bit about how grief plays into how you yourself view grief? Because you say it makes, I forget the line, but there's something about ordinary. This holding this extreme grief is completely ordinary, but feels so monumental. And holding both of those at the same time, I think, was really poetic for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think grief in various ways plays out in the book, a sense of kind of ongoing loss. And I suppose I just have a sense that everybody in the book and everybody, we kind of has pain. And, most people are kind of trying to manage that pain as sort of best that they can. And those aren't necessarily things that people are able to talk about. But it is a state in which many people and all of us understand pain, whether it's the pain of relationships that haven't worked in the book, pain of not being like Faraz entirely, happy with who you are, and shame around your origins, the kind of the grief around that shame. the grief around for Rosina not having been the kind of mother that she would like to have been or would like to be. And I'm kind of just amazed by humans, I think, by the way that they do suffer a great deal. And, you know, in many ways, these ways of suffering are not extraordinary or dramatic, but that they kind of continue on, you know. I find that resilience in people kind of amazing. It kind of, Beckett says, you know, I can't go on, I will go on. And I feel like that spirit is there in the way that I kind of view the grief of the characters in the book.
There's sort of a, I don't know if you say that, I'm a commitment to survival.
Right.
To continuing. Just because it's what we have to do. And I think that there's some really, really beautiful and tragic truth to that, because we don't, ultimately it sort of takes away our choice, our sort of choice. I was wondering if you could kind of talk about, there's a point in the book, and you'll have to refresh my memory for not having the right language around it, but you talk about sort of understanding strength and weakness as necessity and obligation. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to the reframe of those two notions.
Right. That's a really interesting question as well, strength and weakness. I mean, I think, you know, I feel in many ways, like especially in this book and in this society, characters are really, you know, because it is, you know, socially so stratified, and you have that kind of hierarchy, and there is this sense of the powerlessness of the people particularly at the lower end of society, and how difficult their everyday is, and how they have to negotiate constantly all the time in order to survive. But there is a kind of, I guess, a kind of strength that comes, again, I think, from that resilience and that ability to kind of keep going and keep finding ways to go on. There is a scene in the book where Rosina ends up in a not so great situation, you know, not her ideal situation. Her situation kind of deteriorates over the course of the book in terms of what she wants to do and what she gets to do. And she ends up on the beach, and she meets a couple of Americans who are traveling around on the hippie trail. They used to go to India and Pakistan and Iran and Afghanistan. And she meets them, and they kind of remark to her that she kind of looks like Liz Taylor. She reminds them of Liz Taylor. And she talks to them about how, you know, she recognizes that with Liz Taylor, she makes the association of diamonds and of Richard Burton, and Richard Burton buying diamonds for Liz Taylor. But she tells them that, you know, I buy my diamonds. That's how I'm different. And there is this sense, you know, Rosina in some ways is really crushed in that moment by what's going on in her life, and by the weight of all, you know, of her position in that kind of social scale. But you know, the performance of strength, or the performance of being able to say, you know, I am the master of my destiny still. I'm still the star of my own life. Like for me, that was kind of about that sense of strength, even within that position of being really squashed by the world.
I think strength is sort of a useful tool, and or delusions of strength is a useful tool in continuing on with life. Thank you so much. We're totally out of time. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for this book, which I think I told you I'm not quite finished with, but I was I'm enraptured. And I can't wait to finish it. I seriously can't wait for like Margaret to go to bed tonight so I can try to finish it. And take care. And do you have anything you want to leave us with in terms of what you're excited for next?
I mean, I'm excited about a bunch of books that are coming out, and I'm looking forward. I'm moving this summer, as you know, so I'm excited to see how that turns out and do a lot of reading, and just kind of being able to start thinking about new projects and new stories, but doing a lot of reading.
Okay. Well, I hope this is a great summer for you and good luck with your move. Take care. Again,
Thank
the
you for
Return
having me.
of Faraz Ali is out now. I'll put a link in the newsletter. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.